I see this guy and he's leaning up against his car outside of his car. And I look and we have, like the whole head nod. That's universal. It's the universal sign, hey, what's up? Come here. I want a prostitute.
The Blue Line Voice. Blood, sand, and smoke.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Blue Line Voice Blood, Sand, and Smoke podcast. Today's guest is the founder and the owner of Covert Blue, LLC. She's retired from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, retiring in 2022, and her name is Jenn Benjamins. Jenn, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you. I know it's hard when I have 22 years on. 22 is when I retired.
Yeah, it's a tongue twister.
Tongue twister.
So let's get into it and we'll work through everything and we'll find out what you did, what you're doing, and we'll have a blast doing this. So where were you born?
I was born and raised in Las Vegas.
Wow.
And I know. And so being here, is different. I lived outside in the rural part of Las Vegas where I could see the skyline. I could see the strip from a distance and kind of grew up on a couple acres of land. We had animals, not very Vegas-y, right? Like that people kind of perceive is like, we all live in casinos or work in casinos and all this stuff. But the reality is the majority of Las Vegas and Clark County where we are is like very outskirts. In very, your typical neighborhoods. We have casino as one of our biggest industries. My dad actually retired from National Guard and then ended up working at Caesar's Palace. So the only time we ever went to the strip was usually the week before school started to go get shoes at Caesar's Palace because they had a shoe store there that gave my dad a discount. So I was born and raised here. I went to high school, graduated high school, ended up going to California for 2 years to play softball, actually, and went to college, got my associates, came back. And I still really didn't know what I wanted to do, but I loved criminal behavior. I love, why are you committing this crime? Like, what makes somebody go the other route? And it was kind of interesting because my brothers at the time, when I came back, were getting arrested all the time. And I was like, okay, I grew up in the same household. What is going on here? And that's for a story for another time. But so my parents ended up getting divorced. I ended up finishing at UNLV and I did get in the criminal justice program. And a couple of months before I graduated, I went to a job fair and this cop who I remember to this day, it's a movie playing in my head, stopped me in my tracks and said, "Have you ever thought about becoming a cop?" And I was like, "No, not really." And he's like, "Well, we're hiring." And I said, "Okay, great." So it took me 2 tries to go because at first some of my friends who I did know that were in law enforcement, really didn't prepare me for the testing process. At the time, we had the TV in front of us and you had to act out, kind of like a practical problem. And I didn't do that well. And I think the interview, I was 22 at the time, and the interview process, the oral board, 3 people in front of you, I wasn't really prepared for that. So the second time I went through, which was probably not too much longer after, I went through, I got through the polygraph, all that whole testing process. And it was funny because, back then you could get eliminated for doing certain things. Cocaine was no, marijuana at the time was no, and sometimes it was 10 years since you did it or tried it or experimented or whatever. And I almost didn't get hired because I had too many traffic tickets. So I was like, oh, no. And someone went to bat for me that I knew within the department and said, and the recruiter was like, "Hey, I'm going to go in and state the case that you should be hired on." And Darlene Morningstar was my background investigator. So I thank her. She's been long retired, but I ended up on the department. And so I went through, there was only there was probably 10 of us, 10 females that started in the academy. We had 90 something people. We had a very large academy at the time, and there was 10 women. And by the end of the first inspection, which was the end of the first week, I think we had 5. And so we eliminated a lot. I mean, there was a lot of guys that dropped as well, but we eliminated more. And then throughout the process, by the end of the time we graduated the academy, there was 3 of us. And then by the time field training was done, there was 2 of us. So it really eliminated.
Does Las Vegas Metro, do they have their own academy?
It's
Yeah,
just
'cause
us.
it's so big.
Yeah. It's just
Yeah.
us. Yeah. We actually have a whole building. We have a track. We have I mean, it's a big thing. And it's even gotten bigger now because now we have, it's called Jedi, which is like a huge resource with, like virtual reality stuff, like all that stuff. Like it's really gotten really high tech, but we were the last class to go through the original kind of like, building, which used to be next door to a substation. It was really, really small, but now they have this huge academy that's down in Northwest. It's really a nice auditorium kind of thing, So I ended up graduating field training, ended up at Bolden Area Command in community policing, and I was still on probation at the time, and it was we called it the West Side. When Rodney King happened, there was a couple blocks in that neighborhood that we did, like it was war, right? So that was in 95, 96. So here I am in 2001 now working that area, and they put an area command down the street from where that happened on Martin Luther King. And so we were in charge of essentially, sorry about that. My protectors, my guard dogs, they heard a noise. It's probably the cat. That's why. So vicious.
He can talk too.
Yeah, he could tell you some stories of bodies he's buried. So anyway, so I was in the middle of the West Side, and they put an area command there, and we were like, okay, we gotta get these people to buy in that police station's across the street from the West Side, from the projects, from high gang areas, and probably one of the most condensed area. It is the most condensed area of churches in all of Las Vegas. So not only was it high crime, high churches, predominantly Black and Hispanic, because if you went further south, it was a lot of Hispanic. So we went in there and was just like, hey, it was hot dogs, stickers, events, but we also went, and I like to say, when I would tell my guys this, I go, we're going to go in there and fuck shit up to the bad guys. Go in there and fuck shit up, and my guys would come in and go, hey, we're going to go fuck shit up. I go, great. Because we wanted to get the bad people out of there that were terrorizing the rest of the community, the good people that were in that neighborhood. So
did you enjoy the community policing aspect?
I loved it because I came back later and was a sergeant of community policing. And I really believe that there's some things, because some cops had a bad, not on our department because we do a good job about that, but across the country where you're like, oh, you guys are doing another Hug a Thug event, or you guys are doing passing out backpacks and taking pictures and doing these cutesy little things, but that's not what we did. We went after drug houses and the owners of the drug houses who were allowing that to happen. We did intervention programs where if I recognize, or a cop came to me and goes, Jen, we've been at this house 3 times in the last 2 weeks for a domestic. Can you address this on an intervention standpoint? So I'd say, yeah, I put 2 of my guys, send them down there, and we give that family resources to try to eliminate the call for service, right? Because these guys are put on resources. They're not getting along. It may not reach to the point of battery, but they're calling us all the time. Let's see if we can intervene so they're not a continual call for service, So that's the kind of things we did. So it wasn't just, but that also made us extremely busy, but it also made us very reliable. We relied on to try to fix a problem that sometimes we just couldn't fix. And that became a little frustrating, especially if I'm a sergeant and I'm answering the captain, bypassing a lieutenant, because he wants to know what's going on in his area command and why we weren't fixing it. God, I can only do, I know I'm great, but I can't work
Right.
miracles.
And community police, and right, so you're still answering your calls for service, but you're also trying to engage with the community.
No, we were like 100% like in a way reactive because like we were our own squad. Like the community policing, every area command here has a community policing team where it's a sergeant and anywhere between 6 to 12. I had 12 people under me, and including a crime analyst and a crime prevention specialist. So that's what we did, was like community oriented policing, where we went back and we did the community events and the coffee with a cop and all that stuff. But we also did intervention. We did, had something called recap, which is another thing when you had like a homicide or a shooting or something like that that happened in a certain neighborhood. We would come usually a couple hours later or the next day as soon as we could and gather the resources. And we brought religious organizations, we brought resources to that community that wanted to know what happened in their neighborhood. So, because what you do is you want to like kind of like debunk anything that happened there and ensure the community that they're safe, right? Like, let's say it was a domestic and the dad kills the mom, right? Cops are in your neighborhood and they're flooding the neighborhood, and neighbors 2 houses down are like, oh my gosh, what happened? Like, am I safe? Is there a killer out there? Is there whatever? So what we would do the next day or as soon as possible, sometimes it was an hour later, we would go into the community and we'd go to that neighbor and go, hey, you had a domestic disturbance that happened 2 houses down. You can be rest assured the suspect's in custody. It's domestic related, so it's not going to happen anything outside of this residence. So, just feel comfortable and safe and assured that we're doing what we need to do, right? And then they would be like, oh, wow, that's great. Thank you so much. And sometimes we would have chaplains with us and we're like, we have a chaplain here. He would like to pray for you if you'd like. And I know that it's a voluntary thing. And I know some people are like, oh, now you're mixing religion. But a lot of people actually love that. And they would say, yes, I need a prayer because my daughter in New York has cancer and I'm really, so you see how it kind of ended up being something
Right.
else,
Yeah.
right? But then it would
Yeah.
also be like, shit, you guys are over there for that domestic? Well, they're selling drugs over here on this block, blah, 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 right? And they would tell, and his name is this, and da, da, da. And now all of a sudden they're like giving us more information about what's going on. So then my team again would go, it's so-and-so, and it's okay, we'll look into it. And then we give that info to narcs, or we start doing our workup on it. And then we start attacking that problem. So it's really like, it was very, very busy. I was very, very busy. That's probably the most stressful job I had because it was about crime stats and it was about reducing crime and it was about you had to answer to a captain versus a lieutenant. And it was really a lot of stuff was put on you.
When did undercover work come on your radar?
So undercover work came on pretty fast. Like the day I got off probation, I went to my sergeant, my community policing sergeant, and he knew everybody. And I was like, hey, I really want to work undercover. And he's like, oh, well, you want to do Vice? And I said, yeah, I think that'd be cool, pretty woman kind of thing. And so he was like, I know some people. And I was like, great, I'm off probation. Let's go. So literally made the call that day. The next week, I was in the Vice office. They told me, kind of wear this, little outfit, little skirt, shorts, tank top, whatever. And then show up here. We're going to brief you and then we'll put you out on the street. And I was like, wow, that was really fast. Like literally it was the next week. I was doing like what I eventually called were test runs. When I went to Vice, it was called a test run, like to see if you really liked it, if you wanted to do it, because it's not for everybody, right? Like you're dressed up, you in the academy, right? They teach you all these things. You have the uniform, you have your tool belt, you have all these things, you have all these options. Well, when you work undercover, those options become like very, very small, especially when it's just you. When you take just the undercover out of it, it's not a lot of like tools, weapons. I mean, you're pretty much, just dressed up in a little outfit, walking up and down a certain street. And then you have your surveillance team that's watching you. So, and they got every tool under the sun. At the time, we didn't have tasers. Vice didn't get tasers until years and years later. So you had the gun, the pepper spray, handcuffs, and fists. That was really it, right? Tack vest would be on, that kind of stuff. So they go and brief me, and we call it a whiteboard, and they whiteboarded it, which means they essentially put the whole briefing on the whiteboard and dry erase board. And so I'm like looking, I'm like, this sounds really easy. Okay, you want me to walk from this place to this place? You want me to say this? I have to say this. They have to say that. Okay, great. This sounds like the perfect scenario. Like, I'm not scared. I feel very comfortable. I feel very confident in what they just told me and the people that were telling me this, right? The detectives. So I get out there, and the first time, and it's funny because the first place, and I still love it, and I tell stories all the time about this area because it was so wackadoodle. Like, it was on the boulevard between the actual Las Vegas Strip, which starts at Sahara, the street, and then Fremont Street, which actually is on Fremont Boulevard. So there's this like gap in Sahara and the Fremont that is just Las Vegas Boulevard, but it's just like the thoroughfare to get from one place to the other. And there's a bunch of businesses there. One of them is Pawn Stars, right? The old Pawn Stars, but it's not Pawn Stars at the time. In 2002, it was just a really seedy like pawn store between those two places, right? And next door to it is a dirt lot, which was one of their parking lots. To the north of it, there's a little street in between, and then there's like a sex store, like on the other side, right? So, and the sex store actually had not just can you buy stuff there, but there's a peep store where the little screen goes up and the screen goes down. You pay the dollar, put the dollar in the machine. The girls like dancing and doing whatever. And so I was like, what a perfect place you guys found to put a prostitute out there, because there was a lot of prostitutes that come in and out, but that one was very, you're at a peep store and a pawn store. So you just pawned your money. You can go buy a prostitute or sex toys and a peep show, like whatever, right? So it was perfect. So, and then my guys could be in the parking lot. They can be across the street. They can be down the street. They had my eye on me. So the first time I ever went out, I get out there and I'm like, okay. And I'm like thinking in my mind, like, okay, I need the sex act for a fee, whatever that sex act is going to be, and whatever the fee is going to be, So, and it could be monetary, whatever. So I get out there and I'm like, okay, I'm looking around, and it wasn't even like a minute. I feel like it wasn't even a minute. And I see this guy, and he's leaning up against his car, outside of his car. And I look, and we have, like the whole head nod. That's the universal. It's the universal sign, hey, what's up? Come here. I want a prostitute. Just kidding. But in that area, it is. You're either there to buy dope or you're there to. So I see him, and we nod and nod. So I walk up and I'm like, wow, they didn't really say the guys would be outside of the car. So that kind of threw me off already. And so I go up and I'm like, hey, what are you looking for? And he's like, sex. And I was like, okay. And he's like, well, how much? And I was like, well, frick, like they never told me how much. They never told me what to charge, and I don't know what the going rate is. Fucking Pretty Woman was like $25,000. And I'm thinking, I don't think this guy has 25 cents to, So I go, I'm like going in my mind, like, okay, well, what should I charge? I'm like, well, I think I'm worth $100. So I go 100, and he's like 100. And I was like, 10? And he looks at me and he's like, 10? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, okay. Like almost he was like, kind of like it wasn't that he was believing it. He was just like, okay, it's too low, but whatever. I'm sure the guy wasn't going to argue with me. Right. So I said, okay. And I tell him what he needs to do. And I said, just meet me over here, and, like to get him kind of away. They end up taking him into custody, and I get back in my sergeant's car, and I'm like, what the fuck, you guys? Like, tell me, like, what to charge. I don't know what the going rate is over here. I thought I was worth $100, and here we are. I'm downplaying this, like I'm thinking $10. I'm worth more than that. But so anyways,
well, you gave him a discount.
Yeah,
you gave him a discount.
He was my first customer discount. That's how we can play that out. But so yeah, he got the new girl, the green girl special, which was $10. So after that, I was like, okay, if these are all like this, I mean, just give me the price. And so they did. They told me the going rate was more like $40 for sex there, this is 2002, right? And with inflation, it's gone up a little bit. But so, yeah, so that was my first experience. And I was like, oh my God, this is like so fun because this is you against somebody else. And it's just like, it's not about reading minds. It's not about like, like I have a job, sex act for a fee. Like that's the two things that constitute the probable cause for soliciting. And so I was like, okay, but the rest of it can be all over the place. You could be, hearing somebody's story, you can, there could be like more of a conversation and you need to lead it back to the sex act for a fee, and then when you get into more complicated things like narcotics and organized crime and cultivating targets, like it's way bigger game than like this was checkers, really, in the sense, right? My goal was to get the sex act for a fee. The most conversation the least amount of time might have been like 15 seconds. I get a deal with a guy or a John, a trick, a suspect. But there could be narcotic cases that go on for a couple meets before I get the deal. And so you really have to conversate with people and you really have to know what your fake you is and how that conversation's going to go.
How did you build your fake identity?
So what I tell people in my trainings is you got to stick with something that you really do know about. Don't make up some fucking wacko shit that you wanted to be when you grew up or who you thought, like Donnie Brasco wasn't Donnie Brasco before he made this whole story, but he knew his story in and out. And he knew you have to know certain things about, if I said, oh, I'm from upstate New York and, born and raised, and then I came to Vegas and decided to be a working girl or an escort or whatever, I better know a lot about upstate New York, right? I do not. You're never going to hear me say I'm from New York because I don't know shit about it. I could tell you a little bit of things like New York City a little bit, but I don't know the boroughs. I don't know all that stuff, right? So what you want to create is a persona that you really are familiar with, that you have some knowledge about. And it was funny because there was at one point I was working bigger organized crime cases and they said, well, what do you do for a living? And I said, oh, I'm a certified lactation specialist. It's a breastfeeding coach, right? I happen to have my certification in lactation counseling. So because I did that after I had one of my kids, I went and got certified. Well, yeah, I can sell that all day. I can tell you about boobs. I could tell you about milk and I could tell you about storing all this other stuff, right? So they were like, and who else knows about that? Some drug dealer is not going to be like, well, tell me about my girl is lactating and she's got that. He ain't going to talk to me about it. He's like, bitch, whatever you're into, like, okay, if you make it, and I happen to have a meth habit at the same time. So like things that you know about, right? Like I would tell people like, don't make up a name that like is so unique that it can be Googled, especially now, right? Like if my name is, so one of my names was Janelle. I also went by Jen. My name is Jen. See how it would be like if I was in the middle of a Walmart and one of my legit friends or family members goes, Jen, yells at me from Walmart. And let's say I'm with one of the bad guys and the bad guy goes, do you know that guy? Yeah. Let me, I know them because it's my neighbor from down the street. And I go up to him and I say, hey, dude, I'm working undercover right now. Like, can you just beat feet, just ignore me and I'll call you later, right? So, and then I go back and go, yeah, he calls me, or let's say it goes back and he goes, I thought your name was Janelle. Yeah, Janelle. It's the same fucking thing. Like this short for Janelle. So there's a lot of things that people don't think about. They're like, oh, my name's going to be, fucking whatever, something completely different. And then now you don't even answer to it because you made it so obscure that you don't know what's going on.
What was it like working in undercover in a mainly male dominant career field area?
Yeah. So think about Vice, right? So Vice is a lot of prostitution, female prostitutes. I mean, they had male prostitution, but it's a very small number here in Vegas. We have tracks for anything. You want anything? We got it. You want a male prostitute that looks like a man? We have First Street in Maine. If you want a trans prostitute, we have We call it the trees, and then we call it commercial center. You can get one of those. If you want, younger, we have a younger track for that too. But predominantly the detectives are men, right? Especially in the undercover aspect, because that's what they're picking up is prostitutes. Not a lot of women in reality go driving down Boulder Highway to try to pick up a prostitute, right? So my job is a little rougher because when I got up there, we had Julie Wise was up there she was the one who trained me when I was up there temporary to start. And she would be the girlfriend or wife of one of the male detectives. And she did an amazing job. Like, you could sell that. Now, when I got up there, I was like, I don't want to be one trick pony where I'm just the wife or the girlfriend and I'm only out on the street to pick up Johns. When I went up there the first time, they were like, hey, we're going to change this up. We're going to target pimps. And so we're going to put you out on the track, especially the Las Vegas Boulevard, dress up like a prostitute. You're going to act like a prostitute, but what you're going to look for are pimps. So I was like, great. But when we weren't doing that, I was like, I'm not going to sit around and not do anything, and just wait for my time, wait for my stage call to go on and then work. I said, I want to pick up my own prostitutes. So I became that one who drove around, because Julie was doing that anyways, but I was like, I want to do this on a whole different level where I am not a one trick pony. I'm not going to just be the girl to be the prostitute. I want to be the John. So I drove around and picked up I tried to pick up trans prostitutes. It's not really that easy. They don't really care for me at all. I don't have the right parts for that. They're not attracted to me. I've picked up a dude that looked like a dude. That guy was so excited when I drove up, and I was like, I rolled down my window a little bit. I'm like, hey, are you working? And he's like, yeah. And he almost looked like he was standing around for a day labor kind of job. Like he looked like a guy who would fix your, like a plumber, right? Like a normal looking guy. And so I rolled down my window a little bit and I was like, are you working? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, I was just wondering, maybe we can have a threesome with my husband that's, at our hotel down the street. I want to surprise him. And he was like, oh my gosh, yeah, that'd be so great. Like, he was so excited. It wasn't a gay guy, I think, too. It was me. And so I was like, yeah. I was like, okay, well, how much? And he's like, I don't know. I was like, okay, well, I got $100. And he's like, yeah, that'd be great. And I said, okay, well, and I didn't want him to get in my car because this is my first time ever picking up a prostitute on the street. And I happened to pick the guy one, right? And I was like, okay, well, just stay here and I'll come back and pick you up. And he's like, okay. And so I leave and then we bust him out. I drive a little bit down the street. We bust him out. We arrest him. And I take him to jail in my car. I put him in my car, and we have regular cars, right? So we don't have patrol cars. And so I take him to jail, and he's in handcuffs sitting next to me. And I'm like, dude, what's your story? What are you doing out there? And he's like, lost his job and he's got these things and he heard you can go over there. I was like, okay, well, it's illegal, man. You can't do that. Plus it's not safe, whatever. And you're going to hit the wrong person is what you're end up going to happen for you. So that kind of thing. I proved to my fellow male officers, because I was the only girl at that time, and most times I was the only female on the squad unless we had a temporary, like a girl who was doing like a TDY, and but I didn't want to be that one trick pony. So I was like, look, I'm going to prove to myself and the rest of the team, like, you guys can rely on me for more than just, one day a week doing work, or 2 days a week doing work. I'm going to work. And so that's where I became very respected, because if you had a girl that went up there, it was really what they did was the prostitution side, and they didn't work the other side. And they were and some of them that I brought up as a sergeant were very awkward into being the girlfriend or the wife, and being the second soliciting case that you could get on a prostitute. They just wanted to do the hoe stuff on the street is very easy. Like I said, it's like checkers. But when you start getting into pimps and you start getting into more complicated things, it becomes chess. Like, you really need to be 10 steps ahead of somebody, and your game has to be pretty good for you to get a case on somebody.
Did you ever get involved working with the ATF or DEA, FBI?
Every acronym under the sun you can think of,
Yeah.
that everyone, right? Like, because eventually after Vice, I went to another unit called Special Investigation Section, which was a section of the department that was like business. They paralleled with business licensing, but they also regulated the businesses that had a propensity to attract other crimes. And it could be nightclubs, pools, pool clubs in the casinos. It could be tattoo parlors. It could be other businesses, like, I mean, even childcare or locksmiths and things like that. So what we did was a lot of undercover covert stuff for those businesses. And so they would come to us like, hey, we need like someone to work undercover to get this business. And eventually that led me to working criminal intel, which is a deeper undercover unit where they have organized crime, political corruption, and they needed undercovers that essentially were extracted out of the department. Like, after I went to that team, I couldn't go to headquarters. I couldn't go to the Christmas party. I couldn't go do cop stuff because now I've kind of like been excommunicated out of the department in a way. And which was kind of funny because people, even, years later, now that I've been retired, I talk more about what I did in the 22 years. And people, like, I had a friend, she went to high school with me. She was in patrol, and she wrote me one time after she watched one of my podcasts I was on, and she goes, I never knew you did any of that stuff. Like, this is crazy. I never knew, that your career went down this pathway and that you had all these experiences. And I was like, good. That's the way it's supposed to be. An undercover is better, not seen, and not heard of, and the cases that go along with it, and that's it. One, it makes a better prosecution, and two, better for the department, because I also work political corruption. Political corruption also involves other cops, other people in higher places. It could have been bigger businesses, things like that. So yeah, the less you were seen, the better. And so eventually I went to criminal intel and worked the Deep UC, and I got to work with ATF. And when I worked with ATF, I thought everything was like, I had it all figured out. Everything I've told you so far about checkers and chess and that stuff, and how, my game started getting bigger. My game got elevated when I met ATF undercovers. Because I believe, and I'll say this, so I'm blue in the face, and I'd probably argue with any DEA or especially the FBI, but that ATF really is the premier undercover federal agency, or that you can find. They sorry,
Mhm.
my cat thinks he's cool. He's always such a ham. So, but ATF really is those people that I admire, Jay Dobbins and Lou Velosi, and who I ended up working with is Agostino Brancaro. That's who ended up infiltrating the Vagos out here. And so I ended up being able to assist in that case in an undercover side, and got to experience being an old lady, got to experience like that side of, really, like, you want to talk about chess. That's who coined the phrase for me, was Tino, because Tino was like, look, this is a long game, but you got to have your shit tight and everything in a row, where, we had social security numbers, driver's licenses from that are of this person that I created, that I know, addresses, places that I've been, other things like that. You really got to have your shit tight when you work those kind of cases. You can't be sloppy with it. You can't just, make an oopsie, unless if your game's really strong, you can fix an oopsie. But, these guys, especially the HAs, the Mongols, like all those big biker gangs, they have a lot of squares, and a square is like a regular person who doesn't commit crimes, and or associates, sometimes they call, like, or an affiliate or whatever, that works at the DMV. They can check out your stuff. That's the difference between the black gangs and organized crime 1%er gangs. They may have somebody that's in the know that vets you. I mean, there's an application process to become an HA. You got to fill out a whole, I don't know. It's like it's like applying for the police department, that 10 pages, like, where'd you live the last 10 years? You know, who's this person? Who's your parents? Who, whatever, just to become an HA, you know? So they'll vet you. And so you really got to have your shit tight, you know, or a real CI that will vet you.
Did you ever come close to getting made?
Not in that case, for sure. There was it's kind of a flex, and I'm trying to not sound like arrogant, but no. There was one time what we would do when I was in criminal intel is, like, we would pick a place that was very seedy, like a casino, a bar, a little, cause we have these tiny casinos out here. And I picked one that was in the middle of, like, the hood. And I was like, white, blonde hair, drove a Land Rover. And I had gone to this little seedy casino, and I had gone there several times. And this other guy that was on my team, he's like, "Oh, I want to go there with you and see what it's like there." Cause it was bad. Like, I only picked bad places. You know, some people like to pick safer places. I was like, where can I go that's like, I can find people that are selling drugs or guns or stolen cars or whatever, right? So I go to this place and I bring him, and he's dressed kind of like white t-shirt, dicky pants, Converse, like very like rockabilly, maybe is what they called it back then. And I remember going in there, and these two black dudes were at the bar, and they're up to no good. And when we get in there, and I'm talking to him, and we're ordering a drink, and all of a sudden the cops theme music comes on, the little like DJ, you know, thing. And I go, I've never been made in a bar before. Like, I bring your ass, and all of a sudden they're playing Cops on the stereo. I was like, I go, I can't take you out anymore. Like, I don't know. It's not that we didn't look like we didn't match. We look like we actually probably dated or something, but I don't know if it had to be him. That's who I always blame for it. And, but that's okay. I mean, I just couldn't go back to that place, you know, by myself, knowing now that that was like an idea in their head. Maybe it was him. Maybe they thought it was just him, and maybe, you know, but not anything. There's a bunch of people who like to talk a bunch of shit when they get arrested, and they go, "I knew you were a cop." Well, motherfucker, you should have played that game then. That you didn't sell me dope, or you didn't, you know, buy my vagina, whatever. Like, you should have played it that way if you thought I was a cop, because they're just full of shit. That's kind of the go-to anyways. Like, I knew you were a cop. Okay, well, probably should have played it different then.
What do people get wrong about undercover work?
Oh, well, one, it's not that glamorous. If I'm doing blowjobs for $10 or less, it's not really that glamorous. You're in the middle of like the hood, you know, at times. And there was, I had to say this, that when I was at Crime Con, and I was just a month ago, and someone had asked me that same question. And I said, the vice side of it is not that fun. It's not like, I've been groped and grabbed. I've been talked to very dirty. You know, I think the perception of the normal civilian is like, oh, it's so cool. You're doing cool stuff and whatever. Yeah, there's some things that are really cool and interesting and makes my career really flavorful and colorful. But, and there were times like with the Vago case, or with OMG cases, when I was in criminal intel, I did drive a Land Rover. I wore Fugazi stuff, that, you know, clothing like Chanel, fake Chanel rings, and True Religion jeans and stuff like that. Like, I look pretty cool. It was all fake stuff, but I was still doing really seedy stuff. I was still hanging out with drug dealers and gangbangers and that kind of stuff. And it's very stressful. I think the common thing is like, oh, it's so elusive and not necessarily glamorous. Maybe I always say that in a different way, but it's not what they think is. And people in Vice, like, I think if you look at it from a cop standpoint, and I don't know what your opinion would be, I'd be curious, because I know, like, our department was very used to Vice because it was very common. They weren't hidden from patrol, especially the Boulevard, the strip cops. But like the other ones are like, oh, I never want to do that. Like you got to dress up slutty and you have to work the street and these guys are groping and grabbing you and stuff. And that's not for everybody. And a lot of cops don't want to do the job. And then their perception of it is like, we get away with murder as legitimately. Like we get all these perks. We get to drink on duty, all this stuff. And it's really not. Like, it's very, very stressful to work undercover. Probably one of the highest divorce rate is undercover and SWAT, believe it or not, because the time out, the way that we live, the things that we're doing during the job, the divorce rate when in 2009, I had a psychologist out of LAPD and she came and taught a training, a women's training. And she said the divorce rate for undercovers and SWAT was 94%.
Holy shit.
So you're going to get your standard issue divorce just being a cop, right? Because that's 80% at the time.
Yeah, that's like protocol, right?
Yeah, that's I got my standard issue divorce, and then, but if you're working specialized units, but specifically SWAT and undercover is the two units that she like pinpointed and was like, oh my God, like this is 94%, this group right here. And I wouldn't doubt if it's even more. Like I have some friends who worked undercover who still maintained relationships in their marriage and barely maintained them sometimes, like, came out the other side and still married. But really, yeah, you're going to get, unless you really work on yourself and you separate those two things, like there's this thing about fragmenting your personality is like when you start working undercover, especially infiltration cases or deep undercover or like narcs, there's a lot of times where your personalities start to like fragment, right? And you start thinking you're the bad guy. You start thinking you're this bad guy. You start thinking that the bad guys are your friends and they're really good guys. And you're like, oh, I don't want to pick. Or you start hanging out with them off duty, right? You clock out, no one's watching you anymore. And you're like, oh, I'm going to go hang out with Sal because Sal's a really good guy and he's nice. But really, you're working a case on him for like money laundering or dope or something.
Yeah.
But you're like, no, he's a good guy. So that happens too, and yeah, it can be very stressful.
I know I did the undercover world for a little bit. And when my daughter was born, I was working long shifts. Overtime was great, right? But
Yeah.
I had to back off because I don't know, because I really wanted my marriage to last. I didn't want to be a statistic of divorce in law enforcement. And my daughter, she was a newborn, but I do remember, I could totally see that, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not home. You're not home.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
you're not home in the sense of like you got your 40 hours, right? And then
Yep.
we were vice. I remember like the third day when I went back up there as a sergeant, the third day, that was probably a 30-hour day because we ended up getting a mom that was being trafficked by her husband who was also molesting their daughter, who also killed their daughter in Chicago. So that case, when I got into work at 5:00, we went and saw this girl at like 6:30. That shit didn't end until like a whole day later because we had to go interview her. Then then this just snowballed into SWAT coming out and serving a search warrant that we did, and then arresting him and then booking him in, and then finding the kids and booking the kids in. And it's like, I remember that day like it was yesterday because that was probably one of the most horrific cases I ever saw on Vice. And I remember like going home and the Indian restaurant was open down the street from my house. And I went to that Indian restaurant and I drank a bottle of wine. And this was like, I don't know, at this point it was probably like noon or something. And then went home and passed out. That was like the most stressful. It was stressful in the sense, but it was also the most horrific thing I'd ever seen. Like that. And it was just a crazy, crazy day. But yeah, there's that. You're just not home. You're doing follow-ups. You're on the bad guy's time, not your time. It's not like, hey guys, can we just follow this guy 40 hours a week, right? We're on their time.
So there's a period, you spoke about this earlier, you came out of the undercover world, but what did that, being in that career field, that particular area, law enforcement, what did that cost you?
Well, I got my standard issue divorce in 2009, 10-ish. About 2011, it was finally done. with all the custody and all that stuff. And yeah, really like, and I can look at it two different ways. One, I had somebody that maybe not understood what I was doing and what I was doing at work. And every time I come home, I'm like a little, I had drank at work and I was dressing a certain way and I had a car and I was gone a lot, right? So there's like your significant other, wife or girlfriend or husband and whatever, like they may not understand what you're doing and then they can make up stories about what they think you're doing. And you're away. So that's not very healthy, is to be away working. And sometimes I think I was away. I chose to be away more because I wasn't happy at home either, right? So I think cops need to look at that. Like, am I working to get away from responsibilities and relationships at home? Or am I working because the job comes first, my family second, and my priorities are wrong, right? Because you can love your family and be like, I love my job and this community needs me to arrest these people and whatever, with the neglect of your household. Or you could just not be happy at home, which I was like probably a mix of both. And so I ended up getting a divorce. I ended up being a single mom. And then actually I got the divorce in 2010, and then I went and worked the biker cases after that and worked deep undercover even after that. And my kids will tell you, like, how I wasn't home a lot. They were by themselves a lot. They raise each other. They're very close now, but their environment was much different than probably the average kid. I had a lot of family helping me out to raise them, and even when I retired, eventually 10 years after that, my kids were like, you need to go get a job. Like we've never had you home before. And now all of a sudden you're home all the time. Like, this is not what we're used to. And so I was like, okay, I gotta start working on myself. Or when they're 18, they're going to move out and they're never going to come back just because they hate me at this point. So I had to work a lot with that after I retired, but we can talk about that later, about peer support and stuff. So yeah, that cost me that. I eventually promoted, and I never really stopped working undercover, because even when I got promoted, I was still being asked to go do certain things, certain operations that were like really a lot of sexual, illegal sex based type stuff, not just prostitution, but a wide range of other things, because they're like, Jen will do it because I will. I'll try anything. You tell me that, we have this target and he's raping girls or he's doing, I'd be like, okay, I'll do it. Like, I was the one who volunteered for everything, right? Which also then kept me away from the kids and the families and relationships. So yeah, so then I eventually went back to undercover because I eventually went back to Vice, but then I was smarter at that point because I knew how this unit could be run more efficiently, how we can get more arrests, how we could think outside the box and do like different fun and interesting things and change stuff up. Like at one point I dressed up one of my detectives as a trans prostitute and put him in the middle of the trans area. I was like, let's see, because this is a hard group to get because they're very smart and savvy about what they do and what they say. So I was like, oh, let's just put Joe out there and dress him up like a woman and see what he does. And he got 3 arrests. I was very proud of him, and he got to talk to other trans prostitutes.
You were really involved in Vice where you wrote the policy. Am I correct?
I wrote a training manual, actually, because that, like I said, remember that first case that I ever did, we didn't talk about prices, right? And I had a great briefing, and it was a whiteboard briefing. I didn't take that whiteboard with me, right? But I was, which we don't take them with us, but like we didn't have like a sort of like, like you have an FTO program, in the normal, when you get on the department, you have a field training officer, you have an FTO manual, and that manual says, okay, you understand that you have to do this on a call, right? Check off. You understand it. You passed it. Great. In order for you to graduate field training. Well, I developed a VTO manual. And what I ended up doing was, I did that actually when I was there the first time. I created the VTO manual. And when I got back there as a sergeant, they were still using it. So I updated it, upgraded it. I created different sections of that manual. So you learned everything about vice, right? Because when you promote in any job in on the department, sergeant and above, you're the liability police at that point, right? Like any of your guys fuck up, it's on you as a supervisor. Like, why'd they fuck up? Why did they not know that policy? Why did they not know that procedure? Why did they not book this in? Or why did they not do this on an arrest? And it comes back to the sergeant and how you're guiding and leading your people, right? So I was like, okay, we're going to really go through this VTO manual. We're going to use it. And so we did street reversals. They had to understand what the girls' role was when it came to reversals, what their role was in reversals. When we do pandering cases, when we talk about the pimp prostitution subculture, when we do room setups, massage parlors, like all of those things we talked about, and you signed off on it. And there were a couple that I was like, we're not signing off on it because you're not safe when you do it. You don't listen to what we're telling you to do. We haven't gotten anybody hurt since Vice has been created. So, you might want to go find a new home, different place than here, because it's not for everybody. And everyone I talk to, and I ask them just to confirm my own theories, because I have my own theories and they're not my own because I've vetted them through Lou Velosi and even Jay Dobbins and those guys. Like, hey, what do you think the percentage is of cops that can do undercover work? And they'll tell you 1%. So, we already have 87% are men, 13% are women. 3% are women that are in supervisor or like higher up administrative roles. So that's really low too. You look at vice and narcotics and undercover, you may have 1 or 2 females on a squad. In vice, you might only have 1. So out of 10, that's still 10% maybe that's on your team if you have 10 people. And so we're low anyways. And then even in narcotics, if you take a narcotics team of 10 officers, 9 or 8 of them are case agents. The other 1 or 2 people on that team are the actual undercovers. So everyone thinks narcotics, if you work narcotics, everyone's an undercover. They're not. They're covert, but they're not going to be true undercovers. So that's still where my theory was 1%. And all these other undercovers that I've asked over the years, they'll agree and say 1% of law enforcement can work undercover.
Let's talk a little bit about peer support. You ended up doing peer support, am I correct?
I did. I ended up being the director of all of Las Vegas Metro's peer support group. It's called PEEP. So EAP is very common. You'll hear an EAP program, employee assistant program, but we had PEEP. We just put a P in the beginning of it. So you have, with Metro, it's nice because it was their own team. You had a director, a manager, and then you had 6 people under you. And those 6 people under you was 4 officers, 1 civilian, and then the other one was a corrections because we also run our jail. So we had a wide variety, right? So because our peer support didn't just hit officers, we hit corrections, we hit the dispatchers, we hit crime analysts, we hit the civilian just taking the reports. We call them a less. So we actually targeted our whole department. So it wasn't just officer based,
Was this a successful program that you were involved in?
It's even
Did
more.
you enjoy it?
Yeah, it's even more successful now. They actually made it a bureau. And if you know the structure of Metro, a bureau is essentially an area command in a way. So they have since hired psychologists to support. And what's interesting, I'd like to point out on one thing and I encourage a lot of other area police departments to do this, is to actually get in law. We have an NRS, Nevada Revised Statute, that says that by law, peer support, like if you told me something, let's say I'm your peer support, you picked me and you confided in me, that whatever, anything, you hate your wife, outside of telling me you wanted to actually commit suicide, I can't tell anybody anything. So there's a confidentiality that's actually in Nevada law that says that peer to peer, in that peer support role, I can't convey. I can't go tell your supervisor, oh, he's having a really hard time because his wife's left him. He's financially in debt to 1 million people and $1 million or whatever. I can't tell them that. I can't even tell them that you wanted to kill yourself. So if you wanted to commit suicide, I have an obligation to support you in that, like I'll literally pick you up and take you to the hospital that we had that was in conjunction with our peer support. They knew what we were doing. It's actually a first responder unit. So you'd actually go be with other first responders who are struggling. But when your boss goes, where'd John go? And I said, look, John's going to be on FMLA. So just carry him as such, and we'll be in touch with you when the next part of this process will happen. That's all I have to tell him. You're a boss. That's all. Like, I don't have to tell him you wanted to kill yourself and you're having your marital problems and you're doing all this stuff. I don't tell them anything. I just tell your administration what they're going to do. And so does that do to a cop that goes, oh my gosh, I can be vulnerable and explain that I'm having some problems? Because I know it's not going to affect my job, get me fired. They can't remove me out of a unit. There's no stigma that's going to go to that. You can go back and tell them all you want. All you do is you go back to work. They can't ask. They can try to ask you about it. You don't have to tell them shit about what happened. And I am obligated not to say anything. So what that does is create vulnerability. It creates a trust in the department that you can do the job, especially in Undercover or SWAT. If they're like, oh, this guy's fucking mentally unhinged, and now we're going to give him back his rifle, or we're going to put him in the undercover defragmented personality world of vice and narcotics, like he's a liability at that point, right? But if you go and get your help and your treatment or whatever you need, even if you have an alcohol problem or a drug problem, like we have options for you before it ends up being you end up being arrested for something stupid you did or whatever.
That sounds like a model that should be carried across the country, because
Yeah.
there's so many cops that, or even in the first responder career field, that are scared to say shit to anybody.
Well,
Because they're like,
they created that
yeah,
atmosphere, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
back in the day, like, when I got on in 2000, but before that, they're like, you're a pussy if you say you're struggling with this dead baby call, or you're a pussy that you had to shoot somebody and now you're having problems with it. Like, you need to man up. And this happens in the military too, right? The
yes.
military is very parallel to what we're doing here in America. And they're doing in some of our military services as well. My kid actually is going into the Navy next month, and she's going to boot camp, but one of her job is behavioral health tech. And so she's going to work right underneath the psychologists that are going to like have to listen to these guys. And if these guys say, hey, I'm struggling, try to get them resources instead of firing them or letting them go or whatever. That doesn't serve anybody. That
No.
doesn't serve America to let a guy who, even if you have PTSD, to let him go back to society without supporting them. Because who caused it? It's like that chicken and the egg thing. That's how I always look at it. Chicken and the egg, right? We bring all our baggage or whatever we have from our childhood and whatever. Then we become a cop, and then we see all this other shit, and then what happens to us mentally, and then we get kicked out after 20, 30 years. Okay, go have fun. Like, enjoy the rest of your life.
I look at it as anybody in law enforcement, the military sector, you're an investment to that municipality. You're an investment to the federal government, depending on where you're working. Through your career, there's a lot of money invested in what you do. So why not protect your investment?
Yeah.
Right? So give them the resources, give them the help they need. But no, all too often we hear John or whoever gets freaking fired because he needed help or she needed help. And it happens too often, still too often.
Yeah, I'll tell you what's most effective and what's been most effective with Metro. I mean, we still get some that go off the rails, right? And because they still have that stigma. While I was there, I had some stupid captain say, hey, if you need help, and this was while I was there, and if you need help, then you're a pussy. This job isn't this shouldn't affect you that much. And I had to have conversations with people about that, right? Because if you're still saying that and we're in fucking 2021 saying that shit, there's a problem, right? So what has become effective, especially for metro and bigger police departments that are modeling what we've done, is like, you got to start from the get-go. You got to start from the academy. Look, we're peer support. This is what we do. We have a family night in the academy, and we go, look, this is what you should look for if your officer family member is struggling, and we're also open to families. So families can call us up and say, hey, my husband's really not doing very well because of this shooting or this call that happened. We get calls from sergeants, go, hey, we just had a really bad baby death. Can you please reach out to every one of my guys who were on this call? And we do that. We're like, yeah, for sure. We get on the CAD. We look to see everyone. We even call the dispatcher and go, hey, how are you doing? We heard that you guys had this really horrific call. Like, how are you doing with that? Do you need anything else? And again, modeling community policing, they may say like, no, the call was fine. Like I've dealt a million baby deaths, but what I'm really dealing with is my daughter has just got diagnosed with cancer, and I'm really struggling with that. Okay, great. What can we support you on that? So it ends up being, a very trusting, vulnerable resource for you to get whatever you need. Like whatever you need, man. If I could find a resource to raise money for that officer's kid's cancer hospital bill, I knew some people that could do that, a nonprofit that could do that. So really it's about feeling like this department isn't going to shit you out at the end of your year, at the end of your time when you're retirement, and forget about you. Peer support actually on our department, we did get quite a few retirees that still called, and they needed some support too. They needed maybe, hey, a referral for a psychiatrist. Like, hey, do you know somebody who can help me with this? And we helped retirees. So you're right. If you invest in your people in the beginning, the very, very beginning, and then you continue that throughout your career and you hold yourself accountable, you don't go and tell their boss that they're a shit show and they're losing their marbles and they have PTSD and they have a drug problem. If you hold yourself accountable and these officers and even the civilians are going to trust you, and they're going to want to talk to you, and they're going to want to get help, and you have invested. I mean, how many thousands of dollars is it to go through the academy, and then the uniforms and the jobs and the paychecks and all that stuff, and the investment in the retirement system and stuff. And then now good luck with that PTSD and that you've accumulated, and the third divorce that you're on, and the kids that hate you, and that kind of thing. And if you don't, emotional intelligence, besides peer support, emotional intelligence is another thing that's kind of, because I do IACP and I do the National Sheriff's Association conferences, and those vendors that are there are, a lot of it's funny because I go AI, drones, emotional intelligence, peer support, drones, AI, like every booth is like around those four things. And emotional intelligence is another thing that is very supportive, that people, still, that's got a little bit more resistance right now still, because they don't want you to share your emotions still and share that you care about these people that you're going to calls for. Like, it's like you can be judgmental about a prostitute. This is where it kind of shifted for me. In my career, it's like, we were a fucking whore. Like, I had some guys, and I just saw a documentary about this too, where a girl was saying, I got arrested by Vice, and they're not there to help you either, because when I was arrested and I gave this detective lip, he was like, well, you're a fucking whore. You're only going to be a whore. This, this, you'll never amount to anything, right? And it's like, why would a cop say that to somebody like that, right? And like, who are we to judge what this person did? And really, when you step back and you go, she's only doing what she knows, right? If she knew better, she would do better, right? So we look at even victims and suspects differently if we think on an EQ level of, and an awareness of the people around us, right? Like that gangbanger only knows gangbanger shit because he grew up in a gang-infested place. If he knew better, he would do better, right? You only know what you know until you know different.
Exactly.
So that would help us police better, if we looked at it like that. Like, not everybody chose that life. Not everybody's there on purpose, especially in prostitution. You get groomed and all of a sudden you think this is all you can do or you have available to you.
I think we both can agree, because being in law enforcement long enough, you see these young kids as they're growing up, and their parents and what they do and what their lifestyle is like. And then as time flies, the kid gets older and now they're on the street, and you look back and you're like, wow, like they grew up in this and they're actually doing the same thing as was going on at home 10 years ago.
Yeah. And then what you going to judge? No, they only did
No.
what they know, right? So that's
Exactly.
where, like, when it comes back to that guy, saying you're a fucking whore and judging these girls, like, one, this girl is, and not he's responsible, but going back to her, her with the attitude, because she's taught that cops are bad. All cops are bad, right? Especially Vice. Vice is out there to fuck you. The chicks are there to literally fucking pay you, and pimps are there to support you and whatever, right? Because that's what the pimp's telling this girl. And then she gets arrested. She's mad. She thinks this is a bad guy. She gives the cop lip. The cop turns around and gives her lip. Like, really? Like, this is what this girl knows. And if you as a cop knew, like, this girl is just trying to survive, why go neck and neck with this girl? And a gangbanger too, right? Like, why be, it ultimately, there's been a couple studies about emotional intelligence has actually reduced uses of force by not playing into it, not getting sucked in or being triggered by the person that you're dealing with at the time, and it could actually reduce use of force, how we see things.
I never let what somebody would tell me, somebody I arrested or dealt with, I did not let that go to my head, like, I'm going to get in a confrontation with this asshole.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's going to lead to bad shit. And
Yeah.
that's going to, a lot of paperwork, and there's going to be a lot of shit involved in that.
Exactly.
And you learn really, really quick. Treat people the way you want to be treated.
Mhm.
I don't give a shit what rock they crawled out from under, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Like, they're still a human, and unfortunately they may have had a bad upbringing, but they're going to say shit to you you're not going to like.
Yeah.
We've been there, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's like, I let it bounce off my chest and laugh about it. But I seen it. I know you've seen it,
Mm-hmm.
where you're like, what the fuck's this cop's problem?
Yeah. Like, dude,
shut up, douchebag.
Yeah. And so then let's look back at supervision, right? So this guy gets heavy-handed. We've seen it countless times on TV, on the Reels or Instagram or TikTok or whatever, where a cop gets sucked into this guy talking shit, right? And then it ends up being a use of force. And then, and I might be talking about a certain thing, but that there's other cops that keep allowing it to happen. They don't intervene, right? They don't intervene and go, hey, buddy, like, maybe he's having a bad day. Maybe his wife yelled at him earlier and now he brought that to work and now he's brought that into this scenario, right? And so we actually have a policy that's called duty to intervene. So you see somebody doing this whole like, and they're going back and forth, and go, hey, tap them out and go, hey, listen, let's calm down. Because ultimately it's sticks and stones, right? Until it becomes stones and sticks, right?
Right.
So, or batons or what, fists, right? So there's that duty to intervene. So that's where you have like when we were talking earlier about women and men and good guy, bad cop. And like, sometimes there has to be that one who's like the level-headed one who goes, hey, like, look, tap out, you go, and chill out. I'll finish this arrest, or I'll de-escalate him in the sense of like, the suspect and him being so angry and whatever. You go chill, get a drink, take a couple of breathers, whatever. It's not worth it. It's not worth to go fist when it's not that level of force, right? That only ends up paying people out. We pay people at the end of the day.
Yeah, you end up paying them. I remember early on in my career, I probably had 2 years on, and working midnights with another guy, and we go to this apartment complex, and it was a loud noise complaint. It was bullshit.
Yeah.
But one of the individuals that was creating a loud noise he was an asshole, right? But take what he says and brush it off.
Yeah.
And the guy I was working with, they ended up giving each other lip service. And next thing you know, they're going to, the words of, okay, let's fight. And I'm going, oh, fuck, here we go. And I'm going, no. And I remember it, like, he's getting ready to pull off his outer carrier.
Ugh.
And I'm like, they're going to throw down. And I was like, no. And I grabbed him. I'm like, come on, dude, let's go.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, dude, wait. And he had more time on than I did by a little bit. But I'm like, dude, what were you thinking?
Yeah. It's ego. It's, I'm in charge. I'm whatever. But still, it goes back to like name calling, sticks and stones, like brushing it off. Like, you know, if someone were to, I mean, I've been called so many names under the sun, even in full uniform, I've been called every name. It's like, great. And what EQ does, what emotional intelligence does is look, you're calling me a name. I know it's not about me. It's about what you're dealing with. So I don't take things personally when you're calling me names and whatever, because one, you're in the situation because you created that. I'm here because you created this call. So because of whatever you did or the situation you're in that you put yourself in. So when they're calling me names thinking I'm the one who caused all of their life fucking problems, and I'm not. I'm there really because someone called me. I don't take it personally. So if you ever read a book, it's called The Four Agreements. It's one of the books that I think every cop should read, because there's 4 agreements in there that will help you through your job. One of them is don't take things personally. Like, it's not about you. They're having a bad day. It's their bad day. You don't need to get sucked into their bad day, right? Or if they're calling you names because, you're a fucking pig and all you do is fucking waste time and you're fucking wasting time on this call, blah, blah, blah. I'm doing my job. Like, you're yelling at me, calling me the C word. You're calling me all this stuff. That's about you. It's not about me. I'm not going to take whatever's going on with you personally, That's one of the big things. The other agreement is to be impeccable with your word, which means don't gossip, don't talk shit, don't say the things that you mean and mean what you say and do what you say you're going to do. So that's impeccable with your words. That's one of the other 4 agreements that I go by, because that's also great in law enforcement, right? Like, how many times do we gossip about the new girl on the squad? Like I've had some girls tell me, these guys, like, they think I'm so hot and they treat me like this because they just want to get in my pants, and I'm on the squad and I'm still at the same time trying to prove myself that I can do this job, or I had this and I didn't mind it so much because I know my capabilities. I know my abilities as a fighter. I know, I always joke about, like, if Mike Tyson's in front of me and he goes, I'm going to fight you, I just pull my gun out and shoot him.
Yeah, right.
I ain't fucking fighting Mike Tyson. That dude's going to fucking kill me, right? If I can retreat, yes. I know who Mike Tyson's is. I can catch him another day, a warrant, whatever.
Yeah,
Let SWAT go get him, right? But if it's toe to toe, but I know my capabilities, and I remember one time I had this gangbanger talking, like, he was yelling at me, talking trash. And I go, look, you're going to shut the fuck up and blah, 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 blah. This is when I was younger in my career. And I remember a guy, when an officer who looked at me like I was a little sister, and that's the beauty of, like, being a very competent female in law enforcement is if you got guys on your squad, they're going to protect you because they're like, you're our girl, you're our sister, we love you. And so no one's going to fuck with our little sister. And I became that on one of the squads I was on early in my career. And I just remember this fucking banger starts yelling at me about something. And I just remember seeing this C-clamp come over my shoulder and the guy grabs, a cop grabs this gangbanger by the neck and he's like, you're never to fucking talk to her like that again. And and the guy was like, sorry. Okay. Sorry. And, we talk about, like, I know my capabilities. I'm not going toe to toe to him. And it wasn't like I was talking shit because I knew he was behind me and he was going to protect me if I could talk shit. But I was trying to tell this guy, what we needed him to do and whatever. And I got louder than he did. But that C-clamp came across and I was like, sometimes it doesn't work all the time to yell and be louder than them, But
yeah. So 22 years, you walked away, you retired. and you dive into Covert Blue, where you're at right now.
Yeah.
So
So I didn't
let's talk
dive.
about talk about what made your decision to retire and then getting into Covert Blue. We'll talk about that.
Yeah. So when I retired, I don't know why, I probably manifested it because when I was younger, I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to retire at 45 years old. I'm going to go live the rest of my life and, all this stuff. That's what I thought in the beginning. But then I really loved my job and whatever. But I had always thought after 20 years, because on my contract said I had to do a hard 20. And then after that, I could leave at any point with a percentage of what I was going to retire with and whatever. But at 45, I had 3 really bad days, four actual really bad days. But my kids were kind of on automatic here. My dog got cancer. The next day, my mom had a precursor stroke. It's called I've TMI or something like that. And then I had to legal my own kid, which my kid was suicidal, and I had to take her as the director of peer support. Had to take my own kid to the hospital because she was struggling. And I was like, what am I doing? And I had another fourth bad day that I won't talk about, which happened 2 days after that. So then I was like, what am I doing, man? Like, this job was great. And this was my life for a long time. And it's paid the bills and I'm financially good. I had actually on paper, I had 27 years on because over time I had bought years, right? So I go to the retirement place. We have PERS out here. And I said, let me look at the numbers. And I said, yeah, I can afford to live on this because everything around me is like kind of falling apart. I mean, some people would retire if their dog got cancer. I had quite a few other things going on, right? So I ended up retiring on 419. So we have you have 10 codes there. Do you guys have 10?
Yeah, it's more so plain English now.
Okay.
Yeah, but there's still some old timers and not other counties still use 10 codes. Yes.
Okay. So we use 400 codes. And so I went to the assistant sheriff and I said, hey, I want to retire, but I want to retire on 419. And then 420 would be the next day, right? So we use 400 codes. 419 is dead body. So I died on the department on 419 of 2022. And then on 420, it's murder. So I was like, no, I'm killing it. But I was not killing it because going back to the peer support, right? I was peer support. I was really great about helping everybody else but myself, which is a lot of what we do in law enforcement. We're really good at helping everyone else but ourselves and actually looking to see what we can do in self-care and all that stuff. So I struggled. That first 6 months was not good for me. Like, I had lack of purpose and broken relationships because I didn't have a plan A or B or C when I retired. I thought, oh, okay, and now's my chance to be the greatest stay-at-home mom ever. And my kids were like, you were never home. I was drinking a lot and really just working around my yard and really had no purpose. And I was really depressed and the phone wasn't ringing anymore because everyone else was still either working or I wasn't needed anymore. My phone wasn't getting blown up. I still had my friends, but they were all working and doing their own thing. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I went through my phone one day and I got rid of probably 500 phone numbers that I had collected over the years. I was like, if this person doesn't text me back within a day, clearly we were just work people, friends, not actual friends. And so I still have my core friends, of course, but the phone wasn't ringing anymore. And so I went to go try to work, but my mind still wasn't right. I went to go work at a casino. I got hired because of my prostitution background, and I worked there for 2.5 months. And during that 2.5 months, I also went through an emotional intelligence program. And that really got my mind right about creating a new purpose for my life and building and mending relationships, building new relationships, but also mending the ones that like my kids, especially, right? Because I literally had a sign over my front door that said checkout is 18. Like, but that's not what I really wanted. What I saw in my future was my kids are going to leave and never come back. And when I started seeing other friends who were retired and then friends that were starting to retire, they had the same scenario. Their kids hated them. They had broken relationships with especially their ex-wives or second ex-wives, or they were single because they were, hard to deal with, or very stuck in their ways, which is what we like to do as cops is like, we like status quo. We don't like change. We like knowing what's going on and stability and whatever. Right. So trying to find someone else to date that's a whole other podcast one day that I'll have about dating in law enforcement. And so I was really doing bad. So during those months that I was working at the casino, I went through a 12-week emotional intelligence program that really got my mind right. And I created a new purpose and I created these relationships and I built the relationships that I had broken throughout the 22 years of law enforcement. So I was still teaching for another company, but I was like, I need something else. Like, I need a new purpose. I need to put all of this knowledge that I had for 22 years, which is very unique and different, especially if you're from Las Vegas Police Department. Like, we have everything here. You name it, it's in Las Vegas, and you name it, and some patrol officers probably been to a call about it, So we come from a unique perspective. Well, I was teaching, but not as often. So last July, I decided to create Covert Blue, and it's I was like, you know what, my cousin, who was almost a 30-year officer with Metro, had a very similar parallel career to me. He worked Vice and Undercover and Intel and organized crime and stuff. He was like, just create your own company. And I was like, man, okay, if I do it, I'm going to create a women's conference that is going to be amazing. And along the way, all these other opportunities opened up. So I created this last July. I went full force. I did all the marketing. I did creating the logo, creating the website on my own, like things that I thought I wasn't capable of doing. I've proved that I am capable of doing if I put my mind to it. And one of them was like creating the website. I was working for a tech company as a SME for law enforcement. And I said, look, I'll pay you, at the time it was $900 he owed me for doing a gig with him. And I said, I'll wash that if you just create the website. And he looked at me and he's like, Jen, if I show you how easy it is to create a website, like you'll have it done in 5 hours. And I was like, no way. Like, I'm not that smart. I'm old. All the things kept coming into my head about how I'm not capable of doing it. In 10 hours, I created a website and now I go on there and I switch stuff up and I move stuff around. And it was easy, right? So once I accomplished that, I was like, wow, okay, great. Now I got that. So then I create the women's training. Then I start doing keynote speaking gigs that got from me creating the company, me creating the website, me marketing, me doing several podcasts. All of a sudden, like, people want to hear what I'm saying and talk about undercover work, talk about Las Vegas, talk about women in policing and resiliency and things like that. And then eventually my women's school happened, and it was the largest women's undercover investigations training that's ever been, that was solely trained by women. So there was no mansplaining of how to be a prostitute or how we deal in our lives, as a guy, from a guy's perspective. And it ended up being amazing. And now we're creating the second one. That one will be next February. I'm creating a mini school that'll be back east, probably in Baltimore area. I'm also doing many other trainings with other instructors. I do co-ed trainings. I speak in front of Narcotics Association, Gang and Investigators Associations. So it's been like this wild ride for the last year. And now in September, I'm going to Indonesia. So I'm bringing it globally.
Wow.
Besides Canada. Yeah. So I'm going to the International Association of Women in Police. I'm going to talk about women in undercover work. So, there's just like so many opportunities that opened up when I decided, like, hey, what is my new purpose? And how can I build and make big relationships out of this? And that's what created like all these relationships that I had. And I actually got your podcast through a company that I signed with, that I met them on LinkedIn, and then we met in person in DC, and things started dominoing with them and their company. And now I signed with their company. We built a great relationship, friendship. And then she sends me your info and says, hey, you really should look into this podcast. And I was like, oh, okay, great. And that was just built from relationships that I built, because I don't like to say networking. A lot of people say networking. I just replace it with relationships, because one of the things that I build, especially in my resiliency section of my trainings, is the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your relationships. If you have great relationships, you're going to have a great quality of life.
Yes, yes. And we spoke about this earlier. Covert Blue, it's also for men as well.
Yeah, actually, the reality is I train more men than I do women. I have the 2 women's trainings that I'll do every year, but the rest of them are essentially co-ed. Like I'll be in Lehigh in October. At the end of October, I'm doing an undercover and investigations training there. It's co-ed, and it includes supervisors, and it includes analysts, prosecutors, anyone that has an effect on an undercover case or a narcotics, human trafficking, or organized crime case. So anyone's invited. It's men and women. The women's school that's only women. Only women are allowed in that room and to be instructors. But the reality is, like, I just did South Dakota Narcotics Association. There was probably, out of that 170 people that were in that room, almost 200 people with the other instructors and staff. There was probably like 10 women. And so I talk about vice and the pimp prostitution subculture and how narcotics shitheads are the same shitheads we're dealing with in vice. And the majority of the room are men. So I relate to everybody because once I start talking about Las Vegas and Metro and the crimes that I've dealt with, and there is, I have to acknowledge this and with myself all the time, is like, because I'm a woman and I did what I did, it's one thing for me to go, and I don't know if you had this perception of me before you read everything about me, but when you look at a woman who was doing vice operations and teaching about that in an undercover capacity, that's a little bit different too than just being an expert in human trafficking, is you're like, okay, what really did she do? Like, what is this? Where is this story going to go? Like, is she the real deal? Right. So I've had some where they're like, I've offered like, hey, I'd like to come out there and do vice class for you guys. They're like, well, we don't really know who you are, or we haven't heard a lot about you or whatever. Like we're not going to pay you, but maybe we'll pay for your room when you go out there and we'll hear your presentation. Or I'd like to see you present first somewhere else before we bring you to our training. And at first I kind of took it personally, right? Like, I'm like, well, and I say this jokingly, like, bitch, you should know who I am. Like, don't you know who I am? I'm Jenn Benjamins from Las Vegas Metro, right? And it's not. There's a little bit of me going, okay, that's true. Like, if you have 18,500 police departments in America, right, and hundreds of thousands of law enforcement, like 400 or 700, however many hundreds of thousands of cops, and there's little old me from Las Vegas, and there's a lot of people who know me in Las Vegas. I'm known as the vice chick from Las Vegas, and then now in other states, they're getting to know me more and more. And I think I go, that's right. I worked undercover for a long time. I have a niche I've been training since 2015 across the country. But I still think I'm like, wow, I'm still only working with 1% of the population. And of course, they don't all know me. But the more that I get out there and the more that I have to prove that I know what I'm talking about, right? Like, I know, like, I'm not this girl who spews about pimping and hoeing and the game, and because I talk the game. If you saw me talk to a pimp, you'd be like, all of a sudden Jenn like flipped the switch of being hood all of a sudden, right? And you're like, God, this blonde-haired 50-year-old lady's like talking gangster to these girls or these guys, right? And so it's a little bit different when it comes to that. And then so because I have to essentially, prove that I know what I'm talking about. And that's kind of a rough little humbling that I had to deal with in this last year.
Well, I could tell that you were the real deal before you came on. I knew you were the real deal.
It's taken a lot, though, to get me to where I'm at.
Where can people find you on social media? Website is covertblue.
LLC.com. Yep.
Covertbluellc.com.
Yep.
You're on social media. You're on Facebook?
Instagram for Covert Blue LLC. It's the @ sign on Instagram. I am on TikTok, but I'm not very big on there. I'm huge on LinkedIn. I'm kind of a big deal on LinkedIn. I joke about that because that's where all my chiefs, my lieutenants, my sheriffs, all those people are, is on LinkedIn. Of course, undercovers don't have a LinkedIn page. In my experience with dealing with younger cops now, I've gone to trainings where I'm like, well, where are you at? Where are you hanging out? Where do you get all your information? They're like, TikTok. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm clearly going to have to beef my TikTok page up a little bit. But I do have TikTok. I just repost a lot of stuff on there. But really, Instagram is where I'm bigger.
Awesome. Well, Jenn, thank you for taking, this was an awesome podcast. I really appreciate you
Good.
taking the time.
Thank you. I appreciate you too. I appreciate what you're doing and
Yeah,
having a voice out here because it's really, really important to talk about this stuff, right? Going back to resiliency, we really need to talk about the job and especially feature that kind of stuff so we're all comfortable doing it. You know, I can tell you the worst of my stories and the lowest of lows, but if someone else can convey that, you know, then we can get everybody help and won't be so
absolutely.
taboo, right?
Yeah. And like, that's what we're trying to make it as not taboo.
Yeah.
Still pisses me off. Really, it
Yeah.
literally pisses me off.
Yeah. No, it is. I tell people they're not going to build a statue of you outside of headquarters. So you need to be right for, like, let's say I retired at 45, right? So really, I could live another 45 years of what? I can either live it the greatest I can, or I can die as a statistic the first 5 years after retirement.
Hmm.
You know, it's how I want to do it. But if I don't have the support and the community and the awareness of it, then you know, I'm just a sheepdog going out to pasture.
Yeah. All right, Jenn, thank you so much. I'll be with you in just a minute.